Okay. All right. So hi everyone. I'm Danny Lamb. I'm the tech lead for the Islandora Foundation, and so for this Summer of Islandora session here, we're all doing intros. I'm doing the introduction to Isle, which is something that I've spent the past several years working on, and it's a very important part of the Islandora ecosystem. So, okay, what is Isle? Well, it's Islandora on Docker, practically speaking, right? So it's Docker containers specifically built for Islandora for you to run them. It stands for Islandora Enterprise, and the project does have some history. It's been around for a long time. So it's actually been around for like, gosh, almost 4 or 5 years now. Started out as a Mellon Grant funded project for the Islandora collaboration group. It was when they decided to start the project for Islandora 8, it actually came under the purview of the Islandora Foundation. So this means it's like an official Islandora Foundation, project that we support and that we help out and help grow. So I'll practically speaking, I'm trying to keep this kind of really high level here because like we could just do like a deep dive straight into Docker land if we wanted. And I'm trying to kind of dodge that wormhole right now. So practically speaking, there are 2 projects that make up Isle. One is called Isle BuildKit. This is what actually makes the containers and makes them available on Docker Hub. Every time we make a new commit and push that to GitHub, there's an action that responds, takes the changes, builds the images, and pushes them all up to Docker Hub. If you are looking for a specific version of anything, you can find it. Literally every single commit is pushed up onto Docker Hub, and you can reference it by the commit hash. So if you want this commit of Isle BuildKit, you can go find it and you can go find all the containers, and they're all there. Tag versions will also show up with their actual nice name, so you can grab something that isn't just like random gobbledygook characters. The other half, there's the left hand, the right hand of this, the right robot hand, is Isle Docker Compose, shortened to Isle DC. This is what you would actually use to run your Islandora. So if you want to, spin it up, look at it, run it, maintain it, back it up, restore it, all that stuff. This all comes through Isle Docker Compose. This is not the only way to run the containers. You can use any orchestration tool that you would like, but there's really only a handful out there, and Docker Compose will get you a long way when you're getting started. There are people who are running Islandora using these containers on Kubernetes, but I am by no means a Kubernetes master by any stretch. And so that's something we're hoping to see coming down the pipe later. But for now, it's all Docker Compose, which is fine and will totally meet your needs. So BuildKit itself, I'm just going to try to give a broad overview here. I don't want to get sucked into any traps here, but it's based on Alpine Linux. All the images are Alpine. They're as small as they can be. They're somewhere between like 100 and 200 megs per container when you're running them. It uses S6 to basically manage the service where each container runs one service. And so S6 is this thing that keeps the service up, propped up. What it really does more than anything else is it actually just gives uniformity to all the containers. So we know that because we use S6, if we want a startup script, I go put it in this folder, this one init folder. If I want to put an end script, it just goes in another folder. So all these things for starting the service, shutting down the service, all that stuff, they all just have standard locations where you put the files. We also use confd for configuration management. So that's what actually templates out configuration files based on your configuration. So it works really well. It's kind of an older project, but there really is no better alternative to it yet that we found. And we haven't run into many issues with it being kind of an older project. We build all this stuff with Gradle, which cross-platform. In fact, all of Isle is completely cross-platform. This is the first time that we've been able to say that we officially support Windows, because you can absolutely, using Windows and WSL2, you can absolutely build and run Islandora. ILDC is the Docker Compose tools, and just in general, what it's going to do for you is it's going to make your Docker Compose files. After it makes your Docker Compose file, it's going to give you a bunch of tools to like manage your site. So you can use Composer and PHP, Drush, all that stuff to do your Drupal-y stuff. But then there's a bunch of new tools for you to do stuff like Reindex, backup, restore, etc. Most of the time you're going to be working within ILDC. And chances are what you're really going to be working in is something we call it the code base folder, which is where your Drupal site lives. And we'll get into that in a minute. So why would you want to do this? I guess that's really the first question. I should have led with that. Why would you want to do this? Well, you don't want to just do it just because. Yes, Docker is a new-ish technology, but there's just a lot of benefits to it. There is an insane number of benefits to using ISLE. Having lived and worked in the pre-ISLE paradigm where we had to build everything ourselves and we were using various different tools, eventually we kind of settled on using Ansible and the Ansible playbook. Boy, is it just easier. So faster, for sure. When I was using the playbook, a build would take like maybe 45 minutes. I don't have the world's greatest internet, but about 45 minutes on average. This is now down to like a minute or two. It has, like tenfold. It's just shrank the amount of time that you use. That's because we built things with BuildKit. That's why it's called ISLE BuildKit. It's just a way of building Docker containers that's super fast and caches absolutely everything. So if I go and I download Tomcat, the next time I try to rebuild, it's going to know and it's got it cached and it's waiting for me and it's not going to try to re-download it again. So super duper fast, super easy to run. It's really just a handful of commands that you need to know in order to be dangerous. It's pretty straightforward to spin it up, and then once it's up, it just whittles away all of the crud you have to deal with. Point, you're just focusing on maintaining a Drupal site, which is hard enough, and you don't really have to deal with all the other things. That's all kind of maintained for you. It has workflows. You can take your site from a development type setup into a staging or production setup. And we've got tools to work you through all of that. We're going to kind of step through this basically here in a minute. And lastly, it's supported. It is everyone else who is having to deal with running and maintaining an Islandora. We're trying just to herd all the cats together into one place, and we say, just use this. We're all just using this now. And because of that, it's that community shared infrastructure that really does just kind of take a load off. We cater to and appeal to people that don't have a ton of resources, but still need to run a digital repository. And so this is definitely a good deal for you if you're in that camp. ISLE definitely helps you out there. So how to use it? There is essentially 3 environments or ways to run an Islandora using ISLE, and they've got some names here: 1, 2, 3, demo, local, custom, and they kind of sound what you'd think. Demo is just there for you to kick the tires. It's essentially disposable. It's a disposable instance that you can just spin up and throw away when you're done. Local is you're dealing with your stuff at this point. You have your local code base, your local repository, and it will let you put that code onto a container and run it. So if you're developing or you're doing a small testing site for someone that's got like your customizations on it, you don't care about what's on the demo box with the demo content, this is for you. This is, if you're developing, this is it. You can point your IDE at that code base folder and you're good to go. The custom deployment, which maybe we here, but essentially what it is that when you're doing everything in the local way and you have this code base, we just do some stuff that's not best for production. It's really just meant for you to be kind of hacking on Islandora. And so what the custom mode does is it takes all the stuff you've done from local and it builds a custom Drupal container for you and deploys it. So this is how you would run it in staging or in production, is you would do that. So all the code is essentially baked into the container. There's no bind mounting. There's no vector on your stuff. And we've also got a lot of tools I'll show you for, adding HTTPS support and stuff like that you would need to do if you're, actually running a legit site in a while. So those 3 use cases all actually basically turn out to be 3 different commands that you run from the command line when you download ISLE. So within ISLE-DC, you just run make and then the name of the environment you're trying to do, and it will just go about its merry way and start building your repository for you. So the demo environment looks exactly like future.islandora.ca. You get the cats and slideshow. It's pre-built with content for you and blocks and a theme and everything. It looks like kind of a polished, finished site. And then after you run make demo, you get it. Your stuff is available at this funny URL here, islandora.trafic.me. That looks wacky, but what it is it's just a fancy way of saying local host. And what it does is it lets you be able to access your site without having to do things like mess with host files, etc. It also lets us set up HTTPS by default and stuff like that, because we actually have certs for a wildcard cert for trafic.me, so we can run properly over, TLS and all that stuff. But that's the demo site. That's what you're getting into when you get that. All the stuff is kind of baked into a demo container. It's kind of hard to get at. You got to kind of crack it open if you want to play with stuff. It's pretty much just, this is it. This is what you get type deal. Local, if you run make local, it's going to look like your boring new kind of Bartik themed Drupal site. It's just going to get you a basic Drupal site. You need to already have a code base for the most part when you're doing this sort of stuff. If you don't have one, you can just take one. So you can start by just like getting a regular vanilla Drupal project and putting it in there and adding all the stuff. Or you can just take the exact same Composer project that we use to build that, and you can just slap it in your local and you'll go. And when it builds everything, you're going to have everything available. Like all the modules will be there and available, but nothing's turned on yet. So you get what looks like a very basic Drupal site, but then you can just kind of start turning stuff on. And if we get time in the demo, I'll show you. There's a very handy command that we have that has a weird name called make hydrate. But essentially, if you're doing any of the major things that we do, like you turn on the OpenSeaDragon module or you turn on the Matomo module for analytics, stuff like that, if you just run that command, it will go and configure it for you. And you don't have to bumble around the UI and make sure that you set everything correctly. So we kind of just like auto configure all the stuff that we know that you need to do. When you have a local code base, and I'm trying to be mindful of the time here, I'm sorry. So if I just start picking up pace, it's me rushing to the finish line here so that there's still time for questions. If you're managing your Drupal site, once you have that local code base folder, you are still just going to use Composer and Drush just like you would any other Drupal site out there to manage things. The only deal you got to be aware of is that PHP on your machine, that's fine. If you have Composer and stuff on your machine, that's fine. If you want to be super safe though, what I do actually just run them with the Docker containers. So you can run those commands just right on the box essentially. And all you have to do is just wrap your command in this. I don't know if you see it. Yeah, it's not going to let me highlight here. But this stuff right here, Docker compose exec Drupal with content bash dash lc blah. You just take that boilerplate and then you just shove your command in the middle here where the quotes are. And it will run. And you're going to be guaranteed to always have everything at the right version, going to line up, and everything's just going to work. When you're local, that code, you mess with it on your machine, the changes are going to get reflected, and vice versa. So what this is doing is that this is using Docker to do the commands on the container, but then the output actually affects what's on your local machine. If you want to develop using ISLE, this is definitely make local is like the way to go here. You can use the IDE of your choice. You just point it at the code base folder and you'll know how to set up an IDE to work on Drupal. It'll work with any of them. I personally am like super old school, and I use Vim in a terminal on the command line for like everything that I do. And I have found that that works not as good as I would like, and I have ended up switching to using an IDE now and then. And the one that I prefer to use is Visual Studio Code. I'm not making a plug for any particular one. I'm not getting paid to say that, but I have found Visual Studio Code works quite well for me. You can also, if you don't want to deal with the hassle of setting them up, because sometimes it can take you a couple hours to get that stuff right, you can actually deploy an embedded editor, which is actually Visual Studio Code, surprise. And it works good too. So there's just an extra configuration you got to set in your little configuration file. And then when you run it, you're going to get this service running in a browser, and you just go to port 8443. And then you literally have Visual Studio Code in the browser pointing at your Drupal code base, which is great. You can set it up. It's got Xdebug and everything in there. You go set your little Xdebug, you know, like widget or what have you for your browser and turn it on. And then when you turn it on, you can do full debugging and everything, and it's all set up for you, which is pretty snazzy. In general, what you're doing here is the basic Drupal workflow. While you're developing, you're going to take everything, even though you've checked out ILDC and your code base sits within it, it's ignored. So that can be its own Git repository. And you're just going to, every time you make changes, you do a commit, you push it up, and it just goes through your standard kind of Git-based workflow for managing a Drupal site. Oh, I've lost focus. There we go. Okay. Sorry, keyboard focus. I'm still with you guys. All right. So then the last way to run it is custom. This is like, it expects that you've already gone through the process of building your own site with Make Local. So you can use demo to check it out, use local to build your own. Once you've built your own and you're happy with it, this is when you run Make Custom. So you're kind of like transitioning between those three states, essentially. So once you've gone through, you've got a code base, you've enabled your modules, you've configured things the way you like it, you've got it, you say, I like this. Then what you can do is run Make Custom. It's going to take, instead of, I'm getting technical here, instead of bind mounting the code into the containers, what it does is it actually just like spins up the container and copies it over and bakes it into the container so that it's there. And then it doesn't have extra stuff that you don't need. It doesn't have the stuff for Xdebug. It doesn't have all of that jazz. It's like a trimmed down container that just runs your Drupal site, and that's it. And you're literally just feeding it the site. We have some stuff that you'll want to do when you do this, when you're running live, and there's support for all that. We can talk about it all if we have the time. But it's very easy to add certificates for, you know, TLS, SSL, whatever they're calling it these days. If you want HTTPS in front of your URL, we've got support for that. It's pretty easy to feed it certs, pretty easy to use Let's Encrypt. I have done both. And we also use secrets when we deploy. So all your passwords, they're going to be set up as secrets, put in secret files, and then the way that they get put into the containers is encrypted. So there's no chance of anyone getting in there and finding their way into your passwords and stuff like that. All right, so let's say you have run the site now and you have it up and you like it and you're doing stuff. Pretty basic thing that a sysadmin is going to need to know how to do is, how do I back this thing up? And similarly, how do I restore it? So we have a bunch of those make commands, make local, make custom, make demo, etc. Now we have some that have some funnier, longer names, but do exactly as you would expect. Make a Drupal database dump, make a Drupal public files dump, make an FC repo export. And if you add kind of those three things, that is essentially all you need for an Islandora. If you can just hold on to those and keep those safe, then you can just bootstrap an entire well, and you have to have your code base in Git. But once you have all that, you're good to go. So this uses all the kind of basic tools, like when you do a database dump, you're just feeding it the MySQL command to dump out your Drupal database and stuff. And public files is just going to tar it up and drop it off. If you do the FC repo export, you're going to use the FC repo import export tool to get it. And if you're on Fedora 6, you don't need that because you got an OCFL file system. Pull that out for you. If you want to restore, it's like you just do the inverse commands. You can do a database import. You can do a public files import. You can do an FC repo import. Again, that uses the FC repo import export tool. And if you have FC repo 6, which you will get by default with ISLE, that means it just takes whatever you used to have. Maybe it was from a Fedora 5, converts it into the OCFL format, and then like slides it so that it's good to go. If you need to reindex stuff, we have tools for that. Commands, reindex Solar, reindex your FC repo metadata, which is something that you can do. That's kind of a new thing if you're still coming in, you know, from the Fedora 3, Islandora 7 paradigm. That's new, but you can run your Fedora without RDF metadata if you want, and just use your Fedora as like intelligent file storage. But at any point in time, you can just reindex your RDF that way, just like you reindex in a triple store. And so those commands, they're available to use. Overview of using the tools. Like if you're running an Islandora instance, the majority of what you're doing is you're kind of staying within that box. It's like I'm in this code base folder, I use Git and I use Composer and Drush to manage the site. And then anything else I would need to do, there's a make command for it. And you just try to stay within the box. Once you get outside the box, you get sucked into the Docker wormhole and everything else, right? So we're trying to make it easy and trying to make sure that all these things work and are supported for you and that you are supported. But that's pretty much it. I've got some time to do a demo, so I can certainly show you guys that. And maybe I'll just go ahead and kick one off and have a build going, and then I can start answering questions for people while the build goes. So you can see just about how long it takes to actually spin up a new site. So here, let me switch screens so that you can see my terminal, and then I'll just let that run, and then we can start fielding. I can start fielding questions. Okay, so we're here. Oh, and perfect. We have an error. That is exactly how demos work. Hang on a second. So never ever do this on your live running site. To this command that I'm typing in, when you add this -v, it will destroy everything. So I'm saying destroy everything, and I also have to tell it, which sounds terrible, to remove the orphans. Get rid of those poor kids. Okay, so it's good now. So what I have here is I have a clean checkout. I'm actually anxiously awaiting a build to pass because I fixed a bug yesterday, and I need to get the builds available on Docker Hub, and we were running into some weird issues here. So I actually just pulled a very new, completely clean ILDC checkout. I called it ILDC clean just to not clash with my existing one that I'm hacking on right now. And so long and short of it, you just type make demo, and hopefully it goes. It pulls down the newest containers, it runs, all the configuration is essentially baked in to do this demo. And when you are doing the this make demo, excuse me, you have to enter a sudo password at some point in time because you have to chown some files. What you're doing is basically the whole restore process. So we have some demo data laying around. When you check out ILDC, you get this demo data, and it's all just zipped up. And what this is doing is I built up a site, I used the export commands, I exported everything out, and I pushed that into Git. And now every time you want to make demo, it is taking this stuff and it's basically doing a restore from it. And that's how you get this site with all this demo content and all the kittens and all the views and all of that stuff. So yeah, so that's it. Oh, I see Morgan. Would love to learn more about the web-based IDE. Yeah, we can show that. I think I have to configure it, but we can do that. It uses something called Coder, which is an appropriate name, however, basically impossible to find on Google. Like try Googling Coder and see what pops up, right? But it's this package to basically, it takes the core of Visual Studio Code and it shoves it in a browser, and you can run it. And it works great. I love it. I can download a Vim plugin and I get all my Vim commands, and then I can navigate without using the mouse, etc. I've also found that Visual Studio Code is really good when you're dealing with Docker stuff. Even if you say you didn't have a setup where you had a code base on your folder and you could point your IDE at it, if you didn't have that, you can still fire up Visual Studio Code. There's a Docker extension that you can get for it, and it will find all of your running containers and be like, which container do you want to go edit code on, and go find it, and it'll just let you in there. It's super nice. We're almost at the end of the demo. This is building a full Islandora site. It took what, 2-3 minutes, something like that. It's pretty quick. This is the reindexing. Okay, and it's done. It gives me some warnings because it doesn't like how I've got some fields configured, but other than that, it's fine. And then if we go, I gotta like redo how I'm sharing the screen here. Hang on. Oh, it'll let me do that. Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna
just while you're looking there is a question in the chat if you wanted to grab that.
Oh, so it is using volumes. No, it doesn't work well because things on containers are ephemeral. And so you go edit the code, that's great. But then if for whatever reason it goes down or you reset it, you're like, oh, I'm going to try something new. When the containers come back up, all that stuff is gone. So you just have to be like hyper vigilant and just make sure that you're always pushing code out with Git and stuff like that. But for me personally, I've been, despite being hyper vigilant, I have shot myself in the foot enough times doing that for me to say, all right, maybe it's time to actually just set up the IDE and use it. Brandon, yes, it's not quote unquote ready yet, but it is there. So I've been working on a pull request for deploying stuff with Isle for like a long time. And it is finally, I think, appropriate and up to snuff. And it will give you a run through of all the commands I mentioned, and then some. It'll step you through, you know, make local and make custom and stuff like that. And it's got pretty much all the information I could possibly give you is there. All right, let me tell it to now look at this. All right, so you can see that now. If I can tell it, if I can spell it. So then here's your site here. General thing to look at. It's HTTPS by default. Your thing is islandora.trafic.me. If you want to go poking around at stuff, TLDR, the stuff that you would expose publicly is run over HTTPS, and all the stuff that isn't is not. And so like your ActiveMQ, you know, admin portal and stuff like that, like you don't want people seeing that, and you would use firewall rules to block that or something. But if you want to go see that stuff, it's available too. But not with HTTPS. Okay, so sometimes that's a gotcha there when you get it. But so you can go see here, I think it's this. Everything by default is admin password. You can see all of your queues. Yeah, you can see NQ, DQ, purge, delete, all that jazz. So everything is available here. If you look at the README, I list out all the services and where you can go. And same thing on that documentation PR that I mentioned, which I'll just drop a link into here if I can find it. I also detail all of this stuff. I can totally, just to show you how fast everything is, set up that web IDE, and we'll try that. And this will be fun because it's actually been a bit since I tried it. So we'll see. Hang on, let me get the pull request here. There it is. So I'm going to put this in the chat for everyone. So please go look at that. If you have questions, eyes super appreciated. If you try to follow any of those steps and none of this stuff makes sense, please let me know. Really hoping to get a good round of feedback and review on that so that it can get in for this upcoming release, because more documentation is what people want about Islandora 8. And so we are trying to do that with this release, and this is something super important. You know, Islandora is great, but at some point in time, some poor soul actually has to run the thing and keep it up. And so we need to help those people too. And that's what I was all about. All right, so I guess let me show you. Can I tell it to just do a desktop here? Let's do that. All right, so it now should just be sharing my desktop. Can everyone see that now? You can see my screen behind. I'm not toggling between two screen shares now. So didn't turn off my notifications. Hopefully nothing goes flying by. All right. So when you're working with ISLE, there's only one config file that you have to deal with. This one config file. And I just got a notification. I hope Bethany is in the, she's not here. Maybe I can convince her to show up. All right, anyway, there's one config file that you have to play with. It's called the .env file. If you don't have one, there's a sample.env that you can just copy paste. But if you run like any of the make commands, it's going to automatically copy that thing over for you. In this is a handful of settings that you can use to control like what Docker Compose file gets generated and what commit hash of images you want to use and stuff like that. Your domain, if you actually have bought a domain and stuff, you don't want to run on trafic.me. All that jazz is set here. You set your configuration and then you redeploy, and it's pretty seamless. So let's just add the coder thing here. So we've got a couple of things here that are like include a service, yes or no, true or false. And so we have by default one called Watchtower that's on. I'm gonna turn that off. What that does is it automatically redeploys containers. So if you're developing using BuildKit, then you've got an ILDC going, it'll just like auto deploy every time you make a change. And so I'm going to turn on this code server service. So I'm going to get out of the file now. After you make a change to configuration, you do this. You just say make my docker compose.yaml. That -b says overwrite it. I don't care if there's an existing file. So it does that. And then you just run docker compose up-d again, and it will and redeploy any configuration changes that you've made. So we run that. It's pulling the code server image from Docker Hub. So I guess give that a second. I wasn't prepared for that. Okay. And then that's done. And then, so if I go to 8443, there we go. We've got an embedded Visual Studio that runs. And then I've got this guy here. I can't remember what he was. Each each browser will have a different Xdebug plugin or tool to use. I can't remember the name of this one, but this is just the one for Firefox, the first one I found and ran, and everything seems to work out. So it's pretty good. Yeah, anything else anyone wants to see? So this is like, how do I start? Great question. So there's like 20 different ways to do this, and I've kind of said at different points in time, and I think this one is maybe the simplest and is the easiest, and maybe it's not like the most perfectly minimal place to start, but I think it's the best starting point, and it's the easiest to comprehend, and it's the easiest answer I can give to people. So let's kill this thing. Hang on. So I'm going to destroy the demo box, and then we're going to go through a local build. Let it do its thing here. So the best place to start, I think, if it'll go here, 1, 2, 3, come on, you can do it. All right. It's not happy. Hang on. Get rid of those orphans. All right, there it goes. Sounds horrible. All right.
Danny,
So
you should repeat again that we should never do that unless it's a test machine.
right. Never, ever, never run this command with -v on your production environment. You are going to be a very sorry individual. So, and if you Google stuff and you're trying to figure out something, lots of times like on Stack Overflow, that's the command people will give you to like say, turn it off and turn it back on again. And if you just blindly follow it, you're going to delete your entire. Just be very aware of that -v. All right. So do I have anything here? I have an empty code base folder, which is fine. I'm just going to delete it. So the that demo site, oh, it's going to complain at me. So that demo site has, show up here in just a sec. You're going to make me type out the whole thing, aren't you? File and like exported Drupal site. So this is that future.islandora.ca. This is future.islandora.ca. Just I'm going to copy this. So I can just git clone this. And that command just says name it code base. I will wait for my slow internets to go. Okay, so now if I go into this code base folder, you can see I've got everything, right? Like, and I've got a composer JSON, all that jazz. To install it, you go to your .m file. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Let's see, what do I need to set? I don't need to set anything. That's right. So what I need to do is, and you don't always have to do this, but I do this for sanity's sake. There's this environment variable that you can set here. Like literally the name of the variable is environment. It's not an environment variable. Sorry if that's confusing. But you can set local, demo local custom here. If you run the commands manually, it like forces it. But out of paranoia, I like to set it depending on what mode I'm in, just to be safe. So we'll do that. But then all you got to do is, now that this code base folder is there, you just say make local, and it's going to kind of do the same thing, except what it's going to do is now it's going to hop to the code base folder, and it's going to run composer install on it. And so now it's composer installing the site, and then after it runs composer install, it's going to run a drush site install, and it's going to bootstrap it. And then it's going to run that command that I was telling you about that auto configures everything, except it's only going to auto configure like 1/10 of what it normally does because you haven't enabled anything. So if I were to take this exact same code base and I were to configure it slightly differently before I run that make local command, I would actually get a fully themed full future.islandora.ca using all of its configuration and everything, just without the demo content. And that is kind of very off-putting. Like you get what looks like a very broken site when you get that, because it's looking for the homepage that you've set, which does not exist. And there's a slideshow that expects these like 10 nodes to be there, but they don't exist. And so you definitely don't want to do that. But if you kind of just do nothing, put that in the code base folder and run it, you're gonna get this site. It's gonna take its sweet time here to install, but it still should only be a couple of minutes. And then it's good. And the reason why it's so fast, I'll just kind of reiterate this, it's because you're not dealing with the rest of the stuff. You're only dealing with the Drupal site. It just puts that box around it and you can just stay in the box and everything's great. And all the other stuff, the OSGI, the Carafe, the Tomcats, the Triple Store, all that jazz, it's just done, So again, it will try to make sure that the files have the correct permissions so that I can edit them, and that also that Nginx can see and run them. So here it's going to enable the Islandora module for you, and then it's going to run that command to go do everything. So here it is. It's just trying to set some stuff. And this will run here in just a sec. See, it says like Matomo is not installed, OpenSeaDragon is not installed. And I think that's it. So it's going to say it's done here. Give it a sec. Sorry, folks. I bet you my site's available though, so maybe we can just go ahead and look at that.
The anticipation is killing us.
So there you go. So now we have this looks like your basic Drupal site, except it's got all the modules available, but none of them are turned on. So let's say we want to go do some stuff. So one of the best ways to get started, I think, we've got a bunch of modules that have kind of pre-built configs for some stuff. Search and discovery is, a very important function of a repository. It's usually a good place to start when you're trying to turn things on. Make sure you can ingest stuff, and then once you ingest it, you want to make sure you can search for it and look for it. So let's turn that stuff on, and then I'll show you that command, and it'll run. So, and again, you've got to wrap this stuff up in that gnarly command, which once you figure it out, you will commit to memory pretty quickly, or as I like to do, pull it from bash history. So, there we go. So Docker compose exec Drupal with content of bash. This will give me a shell. If I just want to run a command, then I can just do this here. So I'm going to say drush en. I think the name of the module is called Islandora Search. This is our feature that has a lot of stuff. This is going to trigger it to turn on Solar and turn on a bunch of things. It's going to install Islandora defaults. This is going to kind of trigger a cascade of stuff. So we just want to run it. And again, everything is ephemeral because it's all containers. So you can totally shell in if you want and do stuff. Just be aware that if it goes down and up again, that history is gone. You don't have that command history to pull from, stuff like that. So I always run it like this. That way I can just pull it with Control R right out of my bash history, and I don't lose anything. It's giving me a warning about the Solar cores and stuff. Don't worry about that. We'll take care of that in a sec. So the command here to do everything, to kind of now it's going to see that you've got Solar, it's going to do stuff. Now it's going to see that you've got Islandora defaults, it's going to do stuff. So I see Mark asking, yeah, you can do single containers up and down with Docker directly and stuff. Usually if something's bad, if you just write Docker compose up-d and run it, it will not touch the ones that are running and are okay. And it will find the one that's not okay, and it'll bring it back up for you. to do all of this jazz, excuse me, real quick, I know I'm running out of time now, is this, it's called Make Hydrate. I don't know how else to name it. Nigel named it. I find it somewhat appropriate. It will literally hydrate your dehydrated Islandora site and get it into a working shape. So now you can see it kind of looks the same as it did before. It's going to run through its stuff, but now it says Matomo, it skipped, but now it's doing some Open Sea Dragon settings and it's doing some Islandora default stuff. It's making a new solar core and making that available and pointing everything at it. And then it runs another migration that you get with Islandora default. So it just does stuff. So if you go enable in a whole bunch of modules and you're like, now what do I do? Type Make Hydrate and it's going to at least get you to a working point. So let's go look at the site real quick. Again, everything is admin password, so I'm just gonna, and it's even saved in my browser. All right. So here you see that has magically appeared and we can search for things. So I'm just going to add a collection just to show you that it works. Test collection with a funny word. What's a funny word? Ridiculous. I guess that's a funny word. Okay, that's what we'll search for. Or make it a collection. Save it. Okay, so if I go back to my site, you can see I've got this kind of standard feed for stuff, but if I do a search for ridiculous, it found it, right? So you get all this stuff because you installed Islandora defaults, you get the full, excuse me, content types. You get the full repository item content type. You can manage its fields. You get everything. But that's the way to start. I think that's the best way to start with your repository. And with that, I've got 1 minute left, so I'm just gonna slide right out. I'm gonna say thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate it. And you know, if you got questions about any of this stuff, like just grab me. That's literally what I'm here for. So you can grab me here. You can send me an email. I'm always on Slack. You can just ping me in Slack. Happy to help. All right.
And just to note too, there is more time like later in the session. There's more Q&A sessions. Danny is around the whole time. So we, you know, if it's related to ISLE, but you want to ask it later after a different presentation, like by all means, that's the whole point. So thanks for that, Danny. That was fun.